Good evening. I always say good evening and expect miracles to happen, for the audience to be quiet all of a sudden. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kate Kaup. I'm in the Political Science and Asian Studies Department and the coordinator of Riley Institute China programs. And I'm delighted to welcome all of you here tonight. Tonight's a special night for us. First of all, this is the fifth in our China's Global Rise series. So it's the fifth of a very strong partnership between the Riley Institute and the Asian Studies Department. And so on behalf of the Asian Studies Department, I'd like to thank our Riley Institute staff who always do such an excellent job of coordinating very complicated setup arrangements. This is also a new initiative for us. Furman has just received a loose initiative in Asian studies and the environment. So you'll be hearing a lot about China's environment over the next few months. We have a team of 7 natural scientists and the China specialist and the director of urban studies, all working together throughout the year and traveling to China together next year to arrange a whole series of new study away and international education opportunities. So keep your eyes out, and if you're interested in China's environment and Asian environmental issues more broadly, be sure to shoot me an email, and we can get you on our liaise student task force that is in the process of being formed. So we'll also welcome you, I hope, in the spring to our Asian Environmental Film Festival that my colleague Dr. Blumenfield will be organizing for us on campus. I would also like to, before I introduce our keynote speaker tonight, just say you may notice one keynote speaker who is not here, and that's Dai Qing, who was originally scheduled to join us for our conference this week. She was unfortunately unable to get the permissions that she needed to leave the country as she thought she would be able to get. So as we listen tonight to a very talented, internationally respected group of scholars and activists who are working on behalf of a very complicated set of issues, trying to work towards improving China's environmental circumstances, I hope we'll also all take a moment to thank those working within China on behalf of environmental improvements. So without further ado, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Jennifer Turner, who will launch our 2-day conference on China's environmental crisis. Is there a way out? Dr. Turner will be opening our conference today, and then tomorrow I hope you'll join us for a 5 o'clock moderated panel with Dr. Andrew Murtha from Cornell and Dr. Stephen Harrell from the University of Washington, followed by a brief reception before our concluding keynote by Ms. Patricia Adams from Probe International in Canada. So Dr. Turner joins us from the Woodrow Wilson Center, where she serves as the executive director of the China Environmental Forum. And it was a real coup for us to get her to come and join us tonight because she is a very respected scholar and coordinator. The Woodrow Wilson China Environmental Forum is known as an animating hub, bringing together scholars and activists and journalists, all focused from multidisciplinary perspectives on how to move China forward in a positive direction on its environment. Dr. Turner has a PhD in political science and public policy from Indiana University and has served at the Woodrow Wilson Center in her current capacity for almost 15 years. She's going to tell us more details about the work that she does, but in case she doesn't brag on herself, you should know that many of the policies promoted by her forum have been incorporated into international treaties, have been incorporated into U.S. government policy, and even incorporated into Chinese environmental policy, governmental policy. So we are delighted to welcome her, and I'll welcome you to the stage now.
Thank you. Ni men hao. You forgot to mention that I used to be a kindergarten teacher in Taiwan, so I can keep you guys under control, right? All right. Well, I'm really excited to be here and honored. I've never too many accolades. I'm just Jennifer from the Wilson Center. So tonight I think I'm going to depress you a little bit and try to bring you back up. Talk to you a little bit about China's environmental choke points. Here's the title slide. About their environmental challenges. And as Kate mentioned, and also, wait, before I even go further, I have to really thank Kate for bringing me up here. See, all she had to do is ask, and I came. And also the Riley Institute, they're just like totally spoiling me today, so appreciate them as well. So at the Wilson Center, I put on meetings, do exchanges, do research, but I'm really first and foremost, I'm a matchmaker. I bring government, NGOs, businesses, and researchers together in US, China, and around the world to help China solve their problems. So I really work with the practitioners. I'm not a super high-level person. I work with the people who are looking for solutions. In my projects, I've done things called cooperative competitors. It's about US-China clean energy cooperation. What else am I doing here? Yeah, complex connections, which is looking at Chinese overseas investment and how that's affecting the environment. Some of that also a little bit food safety stuff. And Choke Point China, which is looking at energy, water confrontations in China. So we're going to talk about all these little choke points. Now, we don't have much time. I think Kate's going to be like going, stop talking at some point soon. So there's a Chinese idiom, and I know like 2 idioms, so I'm showing off here with my 1 idiom. It's called 蜻蜓点水, which means the dragonfly skims the water. So we have limited time together. So I would be going over certain issues. We'll dive down where we need to. But it's not just me just like talking at you. Occasionally I might ask you questions. So you may have to, don't be like updating your Facebook page. You just, listen in because you may be asked a question. So where to start? It's the Forbidden City. It used to be hidden from view from the common Chinese citizen, and now it's hidden from view behind smog. Past 2 years, can you see it? For the past 2 years in China, Beijing in particular has endured really severe particulate matter 2.5 pollution, right? It's the small particulates that are just clouding up the air. It's been called the air apocalypse in China, and the levels in the air quality index, it would get up to 900, almost 1,000. And those of you who don't look at the air quality index in your local newspaper, we utterly panic if it got anywhere near 100, right? Even like 30. So this is really severe pollution. It's been really plaguing a lot of North Chinese cities where it's very cold. They turn the heat on, coal-fired power plants, a lot of smog. But it's not just the north. This is in Jiaxing in Zhejiang province. I actually did my dissertation work not too far from this county. And the reason I pulled this picture up, because it actually is quite pretty in its smoggy kind of way, but to show you that this is more southern China, but it's also this county seat has the population of 1.2 million people. And that's the number of people that's estimated die early every year in China from respiratory illnesses because of the air pollution. Now, in my work, I told you I put on meetings, put out publications. The story, before the past 2 years, we've been doing a lot of talk in China about the clean energy revolution in China. Have you heard about it? Or did you just hear about the smog? Response is requested at this moment. Nod heads, yes, okay. Did you hear about the smog? You've noticed the smog? Hasn't blown over to you. The Californians notice the smog. Blows over them. But anyway, so China is the number one, for the past 3 to 4 years, has been the number one investor in clean energy technologies. Wind, they have the largest installed wind in the world. Now, for a number of years, they would install it, and they would just be like, garbage wind, because it wasn't connected to the grid. But they've been solving it, right? The Chinese government gave subsidies, encouraged wind farms, and local governments built wind farms, and it was just there. But now they're being connected to the grid. The Chinese government has also been encouraging solar PV panels. China produces about 90% of the solar PV panels in the world. But now, as the global market kind of collapsed with the recession, they said, we better start installing these here, right? And so last year, China installed 12 gigawatts of new solar panels, which is more than we have installed in the United States today, total. They did 12 gigawatts last year. They're doing 12 this year. They're going to do 12 next year. Just so if you don't know, I see a number of Chinese faces, and you guys know this, but if you don't work in China, everything in China is big, and then bigger than that. Everything is at a scale that is rather mind-bogglingly huge. China also, the government, in an effort to not only to clean up air pollution, but to promote better economic development, starting about 9 years ago, wanted to encourage energy efficiency. So they have these big targets to 20% drop in energy intensity. And they did it, right? And they're still trying to do that again. So they've made lots of effort. Clean energy, they have cleaner coal technologies. But you know what? Coal is still king in China. About 70% of their electricity still comes from coal. This is actually a shot from Australia. The reason it's a shot from Australia is that China's also, they have a lot of their own coal, but they're even importing coal. They're even importing coal from the United States. Did you know that? It's like, so Chinese, they're getting our coal. Now, coal use between 2000 and 2007, coal consumption doubled. And it doubled again from 2007 to today. It's probably going to double again by 2020. They now consume 50% of the world's coal, which is that now, okay, Americans, the audience, you hang your head down low because we are now only number 2 in greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Because darn it, those Chinese beat us on that too. So what we have, but the Chinese are concerned. Some of the older, inefficient coal-fired power plants. This is my favorite campaign. Promote big and squash small. Oh, my small fell off there. It's supposed to say small. Drat. Oh well, bad cut and paste job there for you. So promote big, squash small. So destroying some of the old coal-fired power plants. And also, China has the world's largest fleet of ultra supercritical coal-fired power plants. These use air cooling. They're about 40% more efficient. They save coal. They save water. It's awesome. But you have a green revolution, and you still got a gray revolution. Because the skies, I'm just waiting. All my China friends are like, let's see, when am I scheduling my next trip to China? Not when they turn the coal-fired power plants on to heat the cities in the north. Because you're going to get this kind of air. PM 2.5 off of the charts. Now, back in, let's say, like December 2012, January 2013, the US Embassy. Now, when you think of diplomats, you don't think like, hey, they're really cool and dynamic people, right? I've just insulted half my friends in the State Department, sorry. But you don't really think of like diplomats taking chances because they're diplomats. Yeah. Well, the US Embassy in Beijing, I think it was in December 2012, January 2013, they started, now we call it here tweeting. In China, it's called Weibo. They started basically tweeting out the PM 2.5 levels in Beijing. And then they even on their website would lay it next to what the Chinese government was saying the readings were. Were they the same? No. But see, what's also interesting too is that the Chinese scale for the air quality, what we call run and hide your children inside air pollution, they call moderate, right? So a lot of people in China, they've got their Twitter equivalent or Weibo. Let's all practice that. Weibo. Okay, good. We've learned a Chinese word tonight. And so the Chinese public, they noticed, right? Because that air quality, you can't miss this. And so you started having lots of people also on Weibo tweeting pictures of themselves with their lovely little panda masks. Greenpeace China had a little photo contest. Tweet your photo in of you and the pollution, right? And just getting conversations going about how, this is not right. And interestingly enough, the news media itself, the state-run news media, had very damning reports about what's going on here, right? We have all these plans, the green economy, and it's still really horrible out. So some people are lucky. Well, these are the kids at the Beijing International School. They actually, this is their outdoor tent. They've got these giant tents where children can play outside. They also have people who have the money buy air filters. Any decent hotel, I'm looking at my friends, you have a good air filter in the hotel. You definitely want that. But still, people, when the air quality spikes like that, the hospitals are full of people with asthma, young, old people. I mean, this is a serious health crisis. I mean, Greenpeace did a study with Beijing University School of Health that said, I think in 2012, that something like 8,000 people probably died in Beijing, Xi'an, and Shanghai because of the air quality. And then information is public, and people are not too happy about it. So in response, the Chinese government has declared a war on pollution. And they've been passing some very, China had air pollution control laws. All right, were they being implemented, folks? No, you don't have to be a policy major to see like something's going on here. But so what they did was that they started mandating that cities, they don't need the US Embassy to tweet what the real air quality is, that major cities in China now have to put out publicly what the air quality is. So they got to measure it, and you can't just have your air quality measure thing way outside the city, right? More accountability for local governments, that you're actually going to say, how's the air quality today, to help inform people so they can know. That said, one other thing I forgot to mention, that during the air pollution time, some environmental activists in China started renting a little bigger than this, little handheld air quality monitors, and people could measure it themselves and upload it online. So a lot of kind of even, we've seen some citizen science emerge from the airpocalypse. So besides monitoring it, there's now going to be pushing some coal-free zones in certain cities. They want to push coal burning further outside, further west in China. I'll show you maps later. So basically, because urbanites, you don't want to get people in cities angry because people protest, right? So you want to try to do as much as you can, quick as you can. But what's really exciting, and again, you're probably going to think my life must be really funny if I find this exciting, but what I find really exciting is that there's also talk about China the government wants to have a coal consumption cap. That, this doubling and doubling and doubling of coal has got to stop because it's costing the economy. I mean, the numbers are, past 40 years, China's GDP has grown 10% every year for 40 years. But if you calculate in, the World Bank and others have done this, that what the air pollution is doing to health, to the economy, can you fly airplanes on days like this, folks? Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in it. That could be costing the country 10% of their GDP. And so in some parts of China, the Chinese researchers are saying, we're not growing at all. All right, so besides coal, what else do you think is causing this air pollution? Shout it out, folks. Barbecue, well, it's true. Oh, yeah. It's true. Okay, when he says barbecuing, he's not talking about, what is it I heard today that you guys do at your home? My tour today said homecoming, got big tailgating parties. It's not that kind of barbecuing. It's the little carts where people are roasting things on the street. It's not the main source. It is a local problem. What's another source? Cars. Thank you. You looked at my slides. Yes, Chinese, they're driving lots more cars these days. But actually, this is not really driving. I often say in China that I use my time in the taxi as a way to practice my Chinese with my taxi driver and learn about what he's thinking about these days. And they will often, years ago, okay, I have to side. Years ago when I would go in taxis, and when it's been polluted in China for quite a while, and you'd say, the pollution's bad, and you'd say, no, it's fog. Like, it's pollution. So most of my taxi rides were arguing between fog pollution. But today, my taxi driver will talk about PM 2.5, the need for a low-carbon economy, and like, whoa. Another good point. There's awareness. And it's not just random, not in my backyard, panicked, but there's awareness amongst the Chinese public, at least among the taxi drivers. So you have all these cars. They're importing a lot of oil, concern for the Chinese government. So what do? They say, hey, we got all this coal in China. They've got a lot of coal. We could turn it into gas, coal to liquids. Coal to liquids plants also can be fairly polluting, use lots of water. They're also doing a lot of coal to gas further out from Beijing to also use that instead of just straight on burning. Could be good. What else is causing some of this pollution? Think bigger, people. Not just like cars and coals. What's really driving some of this pollution? Factories, construction, and let's all put that together under the little umbrella of urbanization, right? I mean, China's economy growing 10% for the past 40 years. They've got factories, they're making stuff that we buy. All right, tell the truth. Imagine in your head if everything in this room that was made in China was not in this room. This was not made in China, so I'm feeling okay here. But yeah, China's the world's factory, but China, it's not just us buying the stuff. The Chinese, they've grown richer, middle class growing. Their cities. I mean, right now, there are plans. The government is trying to encourage another 400 million people to be urbanized over the next 15 years. Right? They've got these huge cities. Remember I said at the beginning, China, everything's big. It's bigger than you think. And then a step beyond that. Little story on scale. This is the Beijing subway map in 2007. Now, when I was first in China in 1987, we didn't have the yellow line. That was built for the getting ready for the Asia Games. So you just had those two lines. So that was in 2007. 2013, this is what we have now. It is, of course, everything in extremes in China. It's the world's longest subway system, 442 kilometers. In another year, they're going to add it up to 500. And then, 2020, 1,000 kilometers in Beijing. But in addition to these subways, another cool thing about Beijing is that they've been building ring roads. Now, China experts, you can't say. How many ring roads does Beijing have? We're up to 7 now, right? My thought is that eventually a ring road will go to Moscow because it's around. And what do you need to build these cities, to build these roads, people? Concrete. And what do you need to make the concrete? And don't say concrete, don't say dirt. What do you need? You need energy. Gold star is whoever is in the middle there. And then we know that their main source of energy is coal. So you've got this cycle. China has coal. Coal is getting more expensive to burn, but they have coal. And you got to use what you have. You've got to grow the economy. I mean, the Chinese government, we're not going to give you Chinese history. That'll be for later days for you guys. But you know, bit of a rocky time before the economic reforms. The Chinese Communist Party didn't have a lot of legitimacy. And one of their main forms of legitimacy is economic growth. You got to keep the economy growing. You got to keep it moving. Coal they've been dependent on. But there's some thoughts now that maybe if your growth and your development is causing your people to get sick, maybe we've got to rethink the model. It's time for a joke break. Beijing, Shanghai, they often have like big competitions, like who's the better city. And so in Beijing, there's a cartoon, a real Chinese cartoon for you here. The Beijinger, if you can't read it there, it says, "We Beijingers are the most fortunate. We can open the window and smoke free cigarettes." And the Shanghainese said, "That's nothing. We turn on our tap and have pork soup." Just so you know, I have no pictures of pigs floating in any water here, okay? It's meant to be my segue. It's also a moment to ask, everyone doing okay? Following along with me? You seem attentive. This is good. Again, former kindergarten teacher, making sure everyone's on task. All right. So, and you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, the air pollution, it's the worst problem in China's environment. That's the choke point. Is that the choke point? It's not the only one. China's biggest environmental problem is actually water. And I will arm wrestle you, and I will win. It's their biggest problem in terms of both water quality, water supply. It's at a level that's even more jaw-dropping. Their rivers are multicolored. Yes, red, green, brown. These are your blue jeans. Okay? In southern China, there's a town in this area in Guangdong that makes almost all the world's blue jeans. About half the textiles in the world come from China. And the smaller textile dyeing firms, well, the prices have to be kept low. And maybe they're not that smart. Who knows? But they'll dye the things and they dump it out. So you have denim blue rivers. 35%, that's a percentage to think of. And some people say I'm lowballing it, but that's the amount of rivers and lakes. That's the lowest 3 water quality standards in China. Standard 4, 5, and 5+. Water at that level should not come in contact with human beings. Now here's a question. If 35% of the water in the United States was so contaminated, if it's so contaminated, is China using it? Of course they're using it. China only has 1/4 per capita of the freshwater resources as the rest of the world. Northern China, extremely dry. They've got a lot of people to feed. They've got a lot of irrigation. It's kind of scary that the kind of contamination that's getting into the water is getting into the soil, is getting into the food. More on that in a moment. We also have the green one, that's a lot of their lakes have a lot of toxic algae problems, runoff. But just in general, what do you think is the main source of water pollution? What? Feces. Poop? Yes, well, actually it used to be. Municipal waste used to be the #1 source, but today it's actually agriculture. Not just China's the #1 producer and consumer of fertilizer. A lot of it coal-based. Got to stick that coal in there everywhere. But also, I mentioned to you that the economy has been growing really rapidly, growing middle class. And in every country around the world, as people get richer, they start eating more meat. And so they've got a lot of factory farms now. North Carolina, they got a lot of those too, right? A lot of factory farms. And one of the challenges is that a lot of the factory farms, you know what? Maybe the poop was the right answer. Because a lot of the factory farms, only about 20% of the animal waste gets treated, just flows into the water. 300 million, another little number I have up on my little depressing water chart here, is that's the number of people who in China cannot access clean water. And this is an incredibly boring slide. This is sludge. Sludge. Do you know what sludge is? It's when you treat wastewater and it's the leftover solids. Now in the United States, because we just did a whole, we have a cool blog post coming up soon of this. I know you can't wait to read it. About sludge. You should see my intern's face. I said, this summer, I want you to research sludge in China. She's like, sludge? It'll be a fun post, trust me. But so the sludge is that when, in the United States, when our wastewater treatment plants, thank goodness, not only do the first treatment, secondary, and the tertiary is treating the sludge. So it's not toxic, right? Well, in China, Beijing, we came across a report that there are like 35 little, or maybe not so little, hills surrounding Beijing that are just sludge. And the farmers are encouraged to take it for free fertilizer. So besides water pollution, contaminating the soil and getting the food, you also have the sludge that's just being not quite wisely spread across the fields. Chinese researchers looking into soil quality. There was a soil survey done in 2006, and it was immediately declared a state secret. But other Chinese researchers have looked into it, and their estimates that something like 20% of China's arable land, their farmland, is probably contaminated with heavy metals. And there's a big crisis. Little public is really alarmed because there's been some testing of rice and saying that maybe 15 to 20% of the rice has cadmium in it. Because unfortunately, where I used to live in Hunan province, which is a big non-ferrous metals mining factory place, it's also the heartland of rice production. And that's where it gets kind of depressing. So besides water quality issues, soil quality, and I mentioned that China does have limited water resources. This is the Yellow River. Back in 1998, the Yellow River stopped flowing into the ocean. Imagine the Mississippi stops right after, I don't know, Illinois. It wasn't like just like right before it got to the ocean. It was like right in the middle. And that was a rather alarming development. But one good thing, one kind of positive side with China on environmental issues is that there are times as a one-party state that they can act quickly. And when they decided that they would enforce a very strict water allocation plan, all of the 9 provinces along the Yellow River, it's the big one in northern China, that they would have strict allocations, they had to be efficient, and now the river does make it to the ocean. But it's a lot of political capital to make it happen. Part of the problem is that water is underpriced in China, and you can't really trade water. Like in the States, we trade water, most efficient users, so you're encouraged to conserve. Bit of slippage on that point. How am I doing, Kate? We're good on time. She's going to, again, make drastic movements if I'm going over time here. Now, besides the water quality and water quantity issues, I want to tell you about a big project I've been doing, the Choke Point China stuff, which has been highlighting yet another major threat to already vulnerable water resources in China: water energy confrontations. And you're in there like, what the heck is she talking about? So 4 years ago, I started a project with this group called Circle of Blue. It's an NGO in Traverse City, Michigan, that's made up of journalists. And they do the most amazing multimedia reporting on freshwater problems around the world. And 6 years ago, they started a study that looked at in the United States, how's energy development impacting water? And their fabulous stories and photos and infographics were looking at shale gas and the pipeline from Canada. And they were doing all this before it was making the news here. I mean, it was an amazing website. And I saw these guys, I said, this is really cool. Because I've told you in my work at the Wilson Center, I put on meetings, I put out publications, I do things on water, I do things on energy. And I kind of, I've thought there should be a Reese's peanut butter moment here, right? Energy and water are linked. But I didn't really know how they're linked in China because no one in my network of researchers and NGOs were really looking at it. So I got a grant and I sent these Circle of Blue journalists to China to find out how is energy impacting water. They did lots of interviews and people would say, government folks would say, I don't know. But here's some data on water. Here's some data on coal. And we put it all together. And one of our key stories was about where this man is standing. The China specialists who know the story have to be quiet. I'm looking right at you, Steve. Just shh. Where is this man standing? No, it's not Three Gorges Dam, but that's a good guess. What? He's in a tunnel? No, that's good. No. Well, no, it's better. You know what? One time I had a guy say, China. Like, yes, he's standing in China. So I'll take tunnel over the China shadow. Where is he standing? It's not a dam. It's a water pipeline. It's not just any water pipeline. It is the world's, with me now, largest water transfer project. Nanshui Beidiao, South Water Northwards Project. See, I said everything's big in China. Any of you guys engineers? Now, do you know that Chinese engineers have a special tattoo? It says nothing's too big. It's true! The Three Gorges Dam! And we're building Mao Zedong. Bless him. You know, he's still 2014, and I can still quote Mao Zedong. It's a good life here. He said, the Yangtze River. Oh, I can use my pointer now. The Yangtze River, right? Lots of water here. And he said, northern China doesn't have much water. The south does. Maybe we could move some up there. It was probably more eloquent, but that was his basic gist. And then the engineers argued for like 40 years, and then they said, we can do this. Right after China got the Olympics, they put the go through because northern China, 20% of the rainfall, cities growing like gangbusters, I mean like all of China. North China also has a lot of grain, and what else does North China have? What's your guess? Coal, right? Most of their coal, and you need water to get at coal. So when we were in the course of our Choke Point China research and multimedia reporting, we interviewed the chief engineer of the South North Water Transfer Project, and we said, okay, sir, this canal, it's built, water's going up north. This one will come on in 2014. But this guy, I mean, I know your engineers are tough, but you're going to have to go through mountains and blast, and I mean, you've got gravity bringing it down from the Himalayas, but we're like, come on, you're not really going to do this. And he said, we must do it. We must get that water so we can develop the coal in northwest China. Water's on the move in China, not just for cities, but it's water on the move to get at coal. And coal actually, when the whole life cycle of coal in terms of the mining and the washing and the using, uses water. So in North China, and we've estimated, and we were the first people that did it, right? We took the numbers the Chinese gave us and said, according to all the different stages of coal in China, it looks like 20% of the water you use in China goes to the coal sector, right? So the coal is king and the king is thirsty. And we went back to China and we gave talks about US choke point issues, China choke point issues. And when we got to this 20%, everyone says, "Hai Gaola, it's too high, can't be that high." And we'd say, well, how much is it? And they'd say, well, 不知道, I don't know. And so what's really cool, and again, this is not very Chinese, I'm going to brag. But now the Ministry of Water Resources went out and did their own study. Greenpeace China went out and did a study. And everyone's come back to me and said, not quite 20, but it's pretty high, right? And the Ministry of Water Resources is starting to regulate the coal industry for their water use. So it's pretty cool. And so we've kind of made this a topic in China, that how energy, almost all energy uses water, right? And water's local. So you can make some decisions on how you develop your energy. That's all we're saying. We're not, just so to make sure, I don't think you mentioned this, Kate, but the Wilson Center, we're nonpartisan, non-advocacy. We're not out here to tell I'm not out here to tell the Chinese government or anyone what to do. I like to highlight issues, things that people aren't looking at, like sludge and choke point issues. What else we got here? Grain belts are on the move as well. North central China, where there's a lot of coal. You got coal and agriculture coming together. Who's going to win? Coal. Ministry of Water Resources told us, ag is having difficulty in north central, so we're going to move our grain belt. And this is China, right? We will move a grain belt. And it's not any old grain belt. It produces 50% of China's corn, 40% of their wheat. But that's what they do. Because energy is so important, you have to get at the energy almost at any cost. Now, we talked about the king. The queen of energy in China is hydropower. And hydropower is developing, moving quickly in China. Right now, about 150 megawatts of their electricity comes from hydro. By 2020, they're going to more than double it. When we went to, in 2010, when we were there checking out what's going on with hydro, and not just Three Gorges Dam. Three Gorges Dam, it's done, right? But there's a lot of other dams going in. And 2010, southern China, which has a lot of water generally, was at the beginning of what ended up being almost 3 years of droughts. And so when we were there, this is like the third largest dam in China. It's down by the Burmese border. I don't even remember its name, right? There's too many big dams. I can't remember them all. But it means that they can't generate as much electricity because they don't have as much water, which is a bit of a problem because when you build a dam, a hydropower dam in southwest China, you're kind of committed to send electricity out to the East Coast. And so it was starting to be a bit of a concern. And I know you're getting worried here, like, wow, they don't have enough water. How are they going to generate hydropower? But you don't need to worry, because you know what we discovered? That now a lot of the new dams that are being built will put a coal-fired power plant next to it, so that when the water levels go down, they can still send electricity out to the coast. Let's talk about the coast of China. See, this is a interactive map that I have on my website. I have to brag. It's not interactive here. I'm sorry. I'm a bit of a Luddite, but it does clicky things on my website. What you do is this shows you how with the hydro, coal, basically these transmission lines that are moving energy from the inland to the coast. And so they import most of the electricity. The coasts use about 40% of China's electricity. And that's where they make a lot of our stuff, right? And that there's some folks in the UK at Suffolk University that estimated that like 23% of China's electricity just is for making stuff for export. And also their CO2 emissions, about 23-25%, is also for things for export. So that, just a little thing here, not wagging fingers at you, but saying that, you know, China's not Las Vegas. What happens in China doesn't stay there, right? It's coming out. And so that we are actually linked to a lot of the things that are happening in China in terms of their energy production. I mean, it's their choice, right? We can argue about that later. So getting down here, because they're looking tired, Kate. We got to wrap this up so they can ask questions, because I know they're getting disturbed. So at the beginning, I talked a little bit about the clean energy revolution and talked to you about a lot of problems. But this is kind of a list. I'm sorry, there's words on it. I usually don't do words in PowerPoint slides. But this is to give you kind of a list of how China is really working on kind of top-down greening, right? Their 5-year plans, they set these ambitious targets. They have campaigns to back them up on the energy side. Action plans are coming. We have the air pollution action plan. There's a water pollution action plan coming out soon. And thank goodness there's a soil action plan being talked about, but I will probably be a grandmother by the time that happens. But, you know. But they've also been revising a lot of their environmental laws and also giving but the most important thing on my little laundry list here is that they've now been telling that the local officials, the cadres, that their chance for job promotion is now going to depend on actually meeting pollution standards. And you're kind of like, well, duh, right? Used to be, though, well, it still is basically, your main way to be promoted was to generate economic development. Deng Xiaoping, you ever hear of him? Yeah, his big thing was fuqilai, get rich quick. Just do it, do it. And so local officials were really motivated to keep doing it and doing it, but now at the cost of the environment. And so, but the thing is, though, they would install the wastewater treatment plants and the SO2 scrubbers and all this, but they wouldn't always turn them on. Okay, I have a silly question for you. I mean, I got my table mate here. All right, there's she's waving at me nice. Okay, let's say, sir, he is a wastewater treatment plant, and next to him is the corrupt county official, and next to him is the local factory. Why would this, well, I shouldn't call him corrupt, he does look nice. This local county official, why is it this official will sometimes turn off the wastewater treatment plant? They need the energy for manufacturing because the manufacturing, the widgets, gets him his stuff. But it's still kind of crazy because they actually do have them online. So you have, and also a lot of local industries. My local industry guy here, you're a textile factory, okay? You're dyeing textiles. This is a textile factory. Do you see a little bit of dye rolling off here? It's, again, I have very colorful slides, except the gray ones. And these are often, they're small. They maybe don't even have, they're not coming under pressure from the local official to really clean up their act. But they also maybe don't even know how to kind of like, well, what do I do? How do I become more efficient? And what's kind of neat is, to give you one example, I've got some friends at the environmental group Natural Resources Defense Council. Do you ever hear that group? They were the ones that sued everyone in the 1970s here. Well, they have a really big office in China, and one of their neat projects is called Clean by Design. And they're actually down in Guangdong province working with these kinds of small and medium textile companies to teach them low-cost, no-cost options to not pollute the water, to be more energy efficient. And NRDC they're not just working with the factories, they're working with local government, with local NGOs. And so remember I told you I'd depress you at the beginning? I want to start bringing you back up here now. That besides NRDC, there are other international NGOs and universities that are engaging in China to try to look for clever solutions to some of their environmental problems. But there are also some pretty amazing Chinese environmental NGOs. And I know that tomorrow night, Patricia's, I'm just teeing you up. I'm not stealing your thunder, okay? She's looking a little alarmed in the front row. But there are Chinese environmental activists. And this is my friend Ma Jun, who back in 2006, I actually brought him to the States on an exchange looking at U.S.-China water issues. And I gave him introduction to, he was a journalist at the time, and I gave him an introduction to a lot of how our NGOs do things on transparency, right? Open information. It's a big tool we have here, right? You as citizens, you could go online and find out, like, what are the factories doing in my area, right? That wasn't always the case in China. But now, since 2008, it's actually the law, that by law, factories are supposed to answer, and governments answer requests for information on pollution. I'm guessing you'll hear about a little slippage in that area tomorrow night. But my friend Ma Jun, after he was on my research exchange, he created his own NGO called the Institute for Public and Environmental Affairs, IPE. And he created China's first online water pollution database, where he simply he didn't measure his own data. He just went out and took government data and put it on a searchable website, which most of you, particularly the college kids, could do that tonight before you go to sleep, right? Because we've got the data here, we've got the technology. But when he did this 6 years ago, it was revolutionary in China. The idea that Chinese citizens could just go find out what the factory's doing was like unheard of. Now here's a question, though. Who are the people who clicked on his website most enthusiastically? Government did. And the government liked it. Who else? The factories themselves, but more importantly, the international companies. Because you might think, the different companies like Target and H&M and all these, particularly clothes, but other companies, their shareholders, they read the newspapers, they see the pollution, and they start asking their company, are we linked to any of this pollution? And then Ma Jun's website was shining a light on the global supply chain, going down to the factories in China. But he doesn't just have a passive website. He's also started doing investigations of different industries to look at their supply chains. How good are they doing? And one of them, as you can tell from my little apply-wapply there in the corner, was the IT industry. He went to all the major IT companies, the Dells and all these guys, and said, show us your books. How clean and green is your supply chain? And I must say with much shame and frustration, the one company that didn't open their books was Apple. Raise your hand if you own any kind of Apple product. All right. Raise your hand if you knew that the Apple supply chain was not so clean and green. Oh, more than I thought. This is good. You guys, you're cheating up here, yeah. But because you know Ma Jun. But actually, but see, you have to keep in mind, while there aren't that many environmental NGOs in China. There's some and they're strong. But see, do you remember what I said his profession was? He was a journalist before. don't mess with a journalist, right? He actually was in the middle of the night paddling through a lake and taking samples at some of the suppliers for Apple. And eventually, they burst open the doors, and Apple, now he's actually an advisor for Apple. So just kind of a quick good news story there. So that's one bottom-up pressure you'll hear more about tomorrow. Clicky. But also the Chinese public themselves. I mean, they matter most. The people taking it to the streets. On the left, you have rural folks. Their protests about a chemical factory that's making them sick, contaminating their land. They don't have as much voice as the urbanites. This is a protest, a somewhat dated picture from back during the Olympics, because the city built an incinerator to burn all the trash coming from the Olympic Games. People weren't happy. But it's not just on the street. And you can imagine during the apocalypses, that you don't want to be on the street protesting, right? No one would see you anyway. But a lot of this stuff is happening online. Now, this is not for the air pollution. This is actually this is just a handful of what were thousands and thousands, evidently, Weibo posts on protesting how in Yunnan province, which is it's down in the southwest, and in this area called Lijiang, which is, I guess I would say the equivalent, I don't know, it's kind of like, it would be like Yosemite, like a mini Yosemite, right? It's a beautiful place. And so a lot of tourists coming there, but it's also an area of China where there's lots of dams, right? And where's all that electricity being sent to? It's going to the coast, right? And so local officials are saying, we could use this electricity. Let's build some aluminum smelting plants. Imagine if in the States someone built an aluminum smelting plant in Yosemite Park. We might get disturbed. Now, but see, a lot of people in China, even if they've never been to Lijiang and this part of China, people heard about it. And so these photos, not all of them are from Lijiang. They're just saying, don't build this kind of stuff and pollute our beautiful Lijiang. Yeah, so that's just, I feel like I could just keep rambling, but I'm not going to. I'm going to finish off here that the other thing that I did hint at earlier is that besides the top-down, the bottom-up, the outside-in catalysts, and I just give an example about our choke point project, which has been influencing both, giving some, again, not horribly changing policy, but putting water energy on the agenda, getting U.S. and Chinese NGOs. The World Bank is working on water energy issues in China. But again, if you ask me in Q&A, there are dozens and dozens of examples of other really fabulous international organizations that are catalyzing change in China. And so that there's still pretty polluted, but I see on the side of China, both the activists and the government, that there's a willingness to start changing, but there's probably still some rough waters ahead. And that's where I'm stopping. Thank you very much. Yep. Take some questions. So I have some dangerously armed people here, armed with microphones. If you would like to ask a question, you can, or say I'm full of hooey, just please invite you to ask questions. Yeah, we got this. He yelled out earlier. We want to encourage this good behavior. And if you say your name too. It's nice to know.
Yeah, I'm Ed Wilmot. I'm with Sustainable Greenville and the Sustainable Upstate Network.
Lovely.
And one of the things that was kind of alluded to, but was not directly talked about, and it's a very endemic issue worldwide, is population. In order to change, make a true change in these issues, we have to address what are the underlying causes. And as the population grows around the world, which China has had their own way of addressing the issue around population, that growing middle class that's happening globally now, the demand is up tremendously. So we have to shift from a programmatic way of looking at this and turn it into a systemic change. And that's very difficult, especially in a growing economy. So I was wondering how China is dealing with this.
Well, I'm gonna quote Lester Brown. You heard of it? Do you guys know Lester Brown? Okay, later on, go Google the book, Who Will Feed China? Okay, it was published 20 years ago. He's coming to talk at my center next week. I'm quite honored and excited. He's a big food researcher. And he has a quote that says, 1.2 billion times anything is a hell of a lot. And remember, per capita, China is using, I didn't give you all, they're using per capita a quarter the electricity that we use in this country, right? A quarter. But that quarter is approaching EU standards of electricity use, which is one of my backhanded insults to you guys. Use a lot of energy, you guys. Cool it. Conserve. But see, but in China, I often tell them, but the Chinese government, in their push for energy efficiency, for cleaner energy, I mean, I can't imagine that any country could go as fast as they have been in trying to do these cleaner energy technologies to be more efficient. But it's just because their electricity demand is growing so fast and so furious because they're building these giant cities, they're building factories, they're building our stuff so he could have that suit. That it's a tough tangle because, again, even though they're investing all this in clean, by 2020, coal is still going to be 70% of their electricity. Yikes. But because my optimism, remember those gray slides at the beginning where it was so Jill from the Riley Institute thought that I had a blank slide. that the air pollution is creating an opportunity and really putting even more pressure on the government to kind of tighten up some of these institutional governance problems. Tomorrow night, she's going to go deeper into it. Because if I don't stop talking on that lane, she's going to throw her pen at me. But China, it is a big challenge. But some of it too that you've hinted at, it's also our consumption, right? It's a tough nut. Question right in front. And then I go, you guys better start coming up with something in a second. This side of the room. Okay, he's right there in front. The last guy.
Wes Trips, a professor in Earth and Environmental Science.
I'm not
Bring
it on.
I just want to ask in terms of, yesterday 300,000 people marched in New York City in kind of this People's Climate March, and tomorrow marks the beginning of a number of climate negotiations and talks in New York. But I noticed that China is obviously absent, I think, from a lot of that discussion. Given all that you said now, looking forward, obviously they have to be part of that discussion. Curious just your thoughts in terms of, given their dependence on energy and their dependence particularly on coal, where does China factor into? Do you see that happening anytime soon, or in terms of their willingness to kind of talk about climate change?
Okay, we got to set something straight with you, Professor. China, while implementation is a bit lacking on some things, right? China has the energy and climate policies that I wish we had. They have a renewable energy law that has portfolio standards. There were requirements that something like 15% of the country's electricity has to come from renewables. They're going to meet that sooner than they expected, right? They have big white papers. The government says climate change is real, it's affecting us, we need to act. The most recent 5-year plan said that they set these targets to decrease the percentage of CO2 emissions. What is it, like 70%? It's like per GDP growth. So even though their economy is growing, they're still trying to hedge off the CO2 growth. But see, in China, the big, people are aware, and you do get people talking about climate change. There's actually a major climate change meeting that happens before the global ones in Tianjin. It just happened again not too long ago. But for China, the climate issue is more about what we call, you're going to love this word, I love this, co-benefits. You ever hear that term? It's kind of weird. It's meaning that in addressing, as China tries to address its local pollution problems from coal, the co-benefit is that, by lowering the pollution from coal, you're also going to lower their CO2 emissions. And China, they've got major, campaigns and pilot projects for low carbon cities. Getting a little slippage on how they're actually doing it, but that China's, on one level you could say, if you're cynical, and there are plenty of cynical people who say, well, China, it's rhetoric, right? On the low carbon stuff in the cities, because they can't really implement it, they don't have benchmarks. But because of the air pollution problem, I think we're going to start seeing some real action. And as China starts addressing, they are talking coal consumption caps, right? They're also developing shale gas. I didn't even talk about the princeling emerging in China, right? Shale gas, natural gas, trying to be efficient. So I wouldn't say that they're sleepy at all on climate. I mean, issues. But again, they've had this little song and dance routine with the United States because it's like, oh, you act first, right? But what's exciting, when the U.S. and China, in 2009, that they signed the Obama-WHO clean energy agreements. And so really since 2009, it's been really, for my network and for me personally, it's a happier place because the U.S. and China at the governmental level are coming together more on renewables, promoting electric vehicles, cleaner coal, that we're talking a lot more. And end of last year, we formed the U.S.-China Climate Working Group. So I know it sounds kind of boring, but I live in DC, so we talk like this sometimes. But it's about how the U.S. and China kind of bilaterally are going to really try to come together more on reducing CO2 emissions. Because ultimately, we're the two big ones in the world. Did I adequately answer your question?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking they are the biggest emitters. So
They're the biggest emitter.
That economies of scale question again. Even if they're doing a great job, they still are kind of the lion's share of the world.
Yeah, but you know what? Guess what? But the story in China, India is going to surpass China in terms of CO2 emissions before too long. We're doing a Choke Point India project, and for all this, shamelessly, just Google Choke Point China, Choke Point India, find our stories, look at our infographics. India is, I'm so not diplomatic. India is scaring me more because I'm not seeing the same kind of policies, the same kind of proactiveness, or the same kind of international engagement in India as I'm seeing in China. And maybe we could talk about Brazil. And so, the emerging economies, the story is the same. It's just that China, what did we learn tonight? Besides Weibo, it's big and everything is huge at every scale. Other question, this side of the room, come on. Any questions? Oh, Jill? One more question. Oh, one question. Oh, they're so strict. This gentleman over here. Watch out for the Riley Institute people. They watch the clock.
I'm Dr. Johnson from the Department of History at North Greenville University. I also teach law at Chongqing University.
Awesome. The hilly place.
I had so many questions, but I want to, not so many, but I want to ask one question about the environment in terms that you didn't touch on is China's pollution in other countries such as Africa. Expanding their resources and pollution there, and by polluting other countries massively, they're actually propping up rogue regimes. There's so many questions I'd like to ask, but I'd like to just ask that one right there.
Well, no, what you do, you go to Riley Institute and Kate and say, you must invite Jennifer back.
No, I'm at North Greenville University.
Oh, you can, but we want you to come
here. Chongqing
here.
University.
No, but I'm saying that, but in terms of this topic, the Chinese, that's a whole, it's a big can of worms. I mean, Chinese, there are a lot, there are a lot of U.S. foundations and European foundations and the NGOs and the research communities that are really, in the last couple of years, have started really looking into what's really happening on the ground. And I think because there's been a data gap on this issue, but they're not just studying it. And what's been encouraging is that the China XM and the China banks and the Chinese government have become increasingly open to talking about how can they regulate their industries as they go overseas, because it's an issue of face as well. And that in terms of long-term investment, because a lot of Chinese companies, even Sino-Hydro, the big dam builders of the world, they're even starting to be concerned about their reputation. And so there is actually, what's encouraging is that there is more global engagement on this overseas investment thing. So, and if not me, I can send someone down here to give a talk on that. And now before she yanks me off the stage, shameless advertising. Now, you guys are, well, not all of you are at Furman University. Some are not. But I don't care where you are. You're in this room with me tonight, and I'm really honored. You guys were attentive. You appear to be quite fun. And I think that while I used to live in South Carolina. I like this place. While I'm in DC, I'm an information clearinghouse. And it's not just for people who are actually doing the work in the field. Because last time, you were connected to things going on in China. And as it was pointed out, a lot of the trends in China are around the world. So you can join my mafia, right? You could come onto our website, type in your email and say, email, I want your listserv stuff. We have meetings, they're live webcasts, they're archive webcasts. I was just saying, I never had a South Carolinian intern come and apply, you never know. We tweet, we Facebook, which means my interns tweet and Facebook. But yeah, Again, you guys were a lovely audience, and I really appreciate you entertaining me tonight. Thank you.